Thank you very much indeed. And as people are getting settled, I'm delighted to say that we're now joined by James Edens, Vice President and Managing Director of CNR International, and by my colleague Una Röngren, Operations Director of Oil and Gas UK. What we'd like to do is have our equivalent of question time. It won't be for an hour, only for 20 minutes. I have a range of questions here, which the audience passed earlier and hasn't been seen by the panel, but I think we can guess where they're coming from. But maybe just to warm up, perhaps I'd like to ask James and Una to give their take both on the presentations this morning and the conversations they've been having both here in Aberdeen. I don't know, ladies first, really? Yeah, Una, perhaps.
Okay, am I supposed to press any buttons here, or can everyone hear me? Yeah, okay, brilliant. First of all, if you hadn't heard it already, I think that Adam and Lindsay have given us a real wake-up call in terms of what's going on in the industry. You can't fail to recognise that the time of change is upon us. And from my perspective, I balance that against the opportunity that I see through working on the pilot initiatives that are currently ongoing. And I see it in terms of exploration, where I believe that because today's barrels that we're targeting are generally sub 50 million barrels, we need a new wave of exploration in frontier areas that will unlock the potential to find the larger volumes. And that's going to involve government and industry working together to unlock areas such as the Hebrides Basin, Forth Approaches Basin, the Carboniferous and the Triassic plays that we believe are out there. There's also barrels to be had in fields that we already have today. In the northern North Sea, that's a conversation about EOR. So we've got phenomenal volumes in the northern North Sea. We've only got 45% recovery, but a 1% increase in recovery in that area could deliver another 250 million barrels. That has to be a prize that technology could unlock. And then lastly, in terms of opportunity, I think the CNS is the next area where we could see significant barrels being developed. The projects have already been found, but they've been too complicated, either because of access to infrastructure, because of costs of drilling, and because individual companies have worked on their own to try and move projects forward. But some of the work we're doing around CNS rejuvenation projects today indicate to me that there are significant volumes that can be unlocked in that area if we take on Wood, all his recommendations, and work together in another way.
Thank you. James.
Very good morning. I just actually would like to first comment on the good work that Adam and the team have done in actually assimilating such a wealth of information, and the fact that we as a basin can actually get 100% coverage of the opportunities and the potential and even the possible opportunities, and actually see that and talk about it and work to engineer ways to recover it. Recover it is a great contribution. So excellent job this morning, and I think it gives us a unique position for the basin. I've had a good opportunity to read through the package, and I was struck by three observations which I'd like to share with you. The first one being production. At 1.43 million barrels a day, just put that in context, that's our lowest production in 36 years. The last time we produced that little was in 1977. And in 1977, we had 7 fields on stream, and the average rate for field was over 250,000 barrels a day. Today, we're producing that rate again. We've got 346 fields on stream. The average rate is 4,000 barrels a day. The economic limit is 2,000 barrels a day. And clearly the economics of this basin have materially changed. And I think that's a new world we need to really recognize. 1977 was 1 year into the application of PRT. Maybe 2014 will be the first year we look to zero rate and remove that burden from the industry. There's an opportunity for us. Let's talk about proved and probable reserves. I had to get that out. That's proved and probable reserves. Again, not a positive story. It's the third year in a row that this basin has failed to replace its reserves. If you're running an oil and gas company and you're not replacing your reserves, you are actually you're in a concerning position. So as a basin, we're not replacing our reserves. They've fallen from 10.5 in 2011 10 in 2012, 9.9 in 2013, and 9.4 today. So we have to turn around that erosion of our potential base. And concerning this year, cancellations, higher costs, shortening of economic limit, these are all concerning indicators of a basin that's shrinking. And exploration, we've talked a lot about exploration. We need to do a lot more of it, and we need to get a lot better at it, because our current rate of activity and our current rate of success, it will take us over 120 years to discover the yet to find. And we've only got 30 years of productive life on our existing assets, production utility. So we've got to seriously speed up our exploration. None of that actually underwrites the potential that this basin has. We are a mature basin here, and there's discovered resource, and there's oil in the ground, and that potential is phenomenal. And many mature basins around the world, and I actually would say every other mature basin around the world, is actually in a state of growth today. So we have to actually start looking at ourselves in that global context and try to contemplate, why is the UK's mature continental shelf in a state of reduction when every other lookalike basin around the world is actually in a state of growth? Because the potential for that is here as well. And that's a real opportunity. And for me, one of the best opportunities that the Wood Review can help us to realize. So we've got to work on that. So here's some positives and maybe a bit of a request. Over the last couple of years, we have built the capacity in our supply chain and in our operating communities and in our access to finance to actually invest for added value 14.4 billion pounds of investment last year, 13 billion pounds of investment this year. That's a tremendous capacity that we've constructed, and actually a commendable achievement. When you think about the jobs and the employment through that capacity, that is the largest contribution that we make to the economy of the UK. And we have to keep that capacity focused on our UK opportunities, on our North Sea opportunities. So, I do think the opportunities are there. The next wave of investment is in front of us. If we foster innovation, if we reduce cost, and if we reduce the high headline rate of tax that we're burdened by, I do think the potential in the basin is there to sustain this level of investment in this supply chain into the future. But you can clearly see that with our current perceptions, we've got more work to do.
James, thank you very much indeed. I was trying to remember what I was doing in 1977, and unfortunately I can remember that. Some of the room will struggle even to do that, I know. So a range of questions here, and I'll try and probably offer them to most of the panel. If you are allowed to pass, hesitate or deviate. Starting at the front end of the cycle, really, we've got two questions about exploration. One, do you believe fiscal incentives to stimulate exploration would make a difference? And two, on the back of that, the number of appraisal wells appears to be holding up well. What sort of volumes do you think you might see coming from those? So, who would like to start first? James.
I'll do the first
tax
part.
incentives and appraisal.
I'll do the first part, and I'll let somebody else do the second part. So the first part for me is I think people, when they're exploring, obviously are looking at the end game of what they're going to get out of it on success. So I absolutely believe that if the return, if the value created is adequate, then the exploration will happen. And so how you create a larger value output can be incentives on the exploration activity. It can be a lower tax take on the production that is achieved through exploration. At the end of the day, it's the value you get out of it needs to be greater before more companies will put money into it. I would like to see myself I like to see people rewarded for success. I like to see when there is a success that the reward for that to be greater, and that being the catalyst for a better return. Not just rewarding for trying, because sometimes when we reward people for just trying, they don't try very hard. So for me, I'd rather see the incentives be focused on when we find something, we get a bigger share of the prize than actually just being encouraged to be busy.
Perhaps Adam or Lindsay on the appraisal side?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, I think I should say that it is correct that appraisal drilling has held up over the last 3 or 4 years when exploration drilling activity has been disappointing. And what we've actually seen is many older discoveries coming through the cycle. So really the point here is that finding these new barrels to develop is not all about exploration activity. It can be done through appraisal activity. And we've seen examples of this recently with fields such as Clare and Mariner, which were actually approved some 20 plus years after they were discovered. And appraisal activity allows this, particularly at the moment due to the high oil price, and technology's advanced so much in the last 20 years. So it's particularly important to continue to revisit these old discoveries and try and bring them through in light of new technologies.
Thanks. Lindsay, tax. Do you think from your oversight in many countries, not just the UK and Norway, would tax make a difference if we could get some better incentives in the UK for exploration?
I think looking specifically at Norway, one of the questions we often get asked is, would the UK benefit from an exploration tax rebate? We do see value having been created by small explorers not in a tax-paying position in Norway through exploration. So the tax rebate there obviously has helped. But one thing you have to realise is that a lot of the Norwegian people don't like this tax rebate. They don't like to be seen to be funding bad exploration. So it has to have had been justified every step of the way. In addition to that, there have been some bad wells drilled in Norway, and I guess that tax incentive hasn't helped that. And they are paying a much higher rate of tax for any new developments as a result of that. In terms of any other types of fiscal incentives, I think we already have some in terms of the small field allowance. It kind of helps protect on the downside risk for any companies that are making exploration decisions. So I guess an incentive always helps, but there are some in place already.
And maybe, Una, apart from tax, there are other things we could do. What can actually put the chili powder back into exploration?
Well, there's a number of things that we're actually doing at the moment. We had what's called a Pitfalls conference a few weeks ago, where we asked people very specifically to talk about the lessons that they've learned. We've been drilling in this basin for 50 years, but we're still making mistakes we were making 50 years ago. And some of it is basic hydrocarbon play fairway analysis in terms of, do you fully understand your source rock? Do you understand your trap? Can you see your trap? Can you prove there's a reservoir there? And we're still learning lessons. So we're looking to have more successful conferences like that, where rather than just talk about what's great about a field, talk about what we learned when we went about and drilled it. And I noticed that in Wood, in the review, he talks about more open access to data, making data more freely available in shorter time frames. And I think that putting more information into an area where, quite frankly, if we say, right, in the central North Sea or the northern North Sea, there are no large fields to be found anymore, therefore let's collaborate and make sure every well is successful. There's real opportunity to do that. But we're also going back to basics. We're trying to look at, there was a Millennium Atlas a few years ago. We're now looking at a 21st century roadmap where we're taking where we know there are risks around the basin, and we're going to generate data that we can put out into the industry that helps describe the hydrocarbon play fairways with the view of encouraging more people to operate. So I think that's the focus area that we can take.
Thanks. A more intelligent approach to exploration. I was actually musing whilst I saw Lindsay's chart as to whether it would be more effective to put money into the lottery sometimes than exploring some parts of the UKCS, but please don't answer that one for me.
Mike, I wonder if I could add one other comment. As exciting as exploration is, one of the best places to find a barrel of oil is in our existing oil fields. And I think that the onus around and where the real potential is starting to be realized, that promoting water flood efficiency, production efficiency, maybe enhanced oil recovery in existing fields is now seen as a bigger and bigger prize to chase. Adam mentioned that in his presentation. 106 current investments in brownfields on the books. When you look under the can, you can see lots of opportunities to find more in what we've already found. And I think over time that'll become evident that that's a bigger and bigger prize. We've seen that in the northern North Sea. There may not be that much to discover anymore, but there is a whole lot in what we've already found that we're not getting out, and we need to put more energy into that.
There's 50 odd billion barrels not yet produced in those fields in the North Sea at the moment. Probably do something to get it out. Right, another couple of questions. I'll do the two together. One is actually around production. One's around operating cost and spend. So on the production one, it's easy to talk about production improving. We have heard it all before. Can we be sure it will happen this time? And on the back of that, how much of the operating spend is going on to existing fields and how much is going into new fields as they come on stream? a man who operates some very expensive platforms, James, and has some views on production. Do you want to say anything else?
Yeah, so I guess in terms of, I hate to say it, but in terms of production growth, I don't think we can just assume it's going to happen. I think it will take diligence and hard work, and I think the whole industry is focused on trying to achieve that. We have grown into a bit of a hole, and it is hard to change trends. This one's been established for 12 years. We will have to work really hard to actually bottom it out and ramp it back up again. And I'm encouraged that so many people are actually planning to do that this year. It's going to be an extremely busy and challenging year. I think most of the operating costs that we're seeing is going on existing fields. Integrity is costing more. Having assurances of safe operating conditions. A lot of work the industry's done over the last couple of years to minimize hydrocarbon leaks. All of that is necessary cost. So that's where the money's being spent. It's being spent for the right reasons. It is actually having the right impact. And I actually like finding those barrels in existing fields. The most cost-effective business I can do is improve uptime on my existing assets. That is the cheapest barrel to develop. So you see an operating cost and capital being allocated to existing fields to improve production efficiency, because that is the best opportunity in the basin. And when we get all our assets to 97%, then that last 3% might be the technical limit. But from 60% to 90% is a huge opportunity, and I hope we're all working on it diligently.
Una, from your perspective, looking at the production side, are we gradually climbing the hill?
I'd like to think so. We certainly had some very serious conversations in the industry last year. We've been working with all the operators, and we've been sort of naming and shaming in terms of making it really clear to people that we do know who's operating at 34% on their field and who's up at 90%. And one or two people got a wake-up call that they didn't realise exactly where they sat. And when you start showing what other fields are capable of doing, it does make people kind of realise. But in particular, we're focusing on a number of areas where we think we can make a difference. One of them is wrench time, by which we mean how many hours a day is somebody physically working versus filling in pieces of paper or forms or in the coffee shack. And it's surprisingly low. You know, good looks like 8 or 9 hours a day. Poor on some fields is 3 or 4 hours out of a 12-hour day. So some companies clearly have room to manoeuvre in terms of improving their processes around getting people working efficiently. But there are other major areas around unplanned losses and around TARs that we are also focusing on and getting the industry to work on. So this isn't, when we've looked at the data, it isn't an age thing. You know, some of the oldest platforms are actually performing most efficiently, but they've had good investment over the years, they've got good processes, they pay attention to where people are spending their time, and that makes a difference.
Thank you, Una. Lindsay, from your perspective of Norway and the UK, just how come was Norway so much better at production?
I guess that overall production figure is because Norway does have huge swing producers that can ramp up production. There are production issues across fields in Norway, things like Grana having compressor issues, for example. So I guess you need to take that overall production number, in perspective. In the UK, we have seen this real unexpected production underperformance I spoke about, and it is because, you know, we have over 300 fields producing. So even if those fields only underperform by a couple of thousand barrels a day, then it really starts to impact overall UK production numbers, and that's where the UK really differs compared to Norway as well.
Thank you very much indeed. I'll actually call the questions to hold there because we're just coming up to 10 o'clock. And I've always been told you should finish on time, not late on these things. So I'd like to thank our panel, Una, very much indeed. Thank you very much indeed. Lindsay, Adam and James for their contribution this morning. Some excellent presentations. They will be available on the internet later via our website. Please can I ask any of you that haven't, or if you can, could you please leave your feedback forms with my colleagues or send them back electronically. We'd like to hear more of how this went. And I'd like to thank everyone, not least our sponsors, both RBS and Herbert Smith Three Hills, for their time this morning. Ladies and gentlemen, have a safe and a dry day, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you very much indeed.